Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Caregiver Crosswalk, Dementia Care Consulting. Never roam alone.
And welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corey Sirota, clinical social worker and author of Someone Died, Now What? Matt, it's tough times out there. Just curious, how are you feeling? Are you feeling more, less, average stress?
Well, I think I would be categorized with, like many of us, where inevitably we all feel a little more stressed. And I would add to that, I think people's patience levels are drastically reduced. And you seem to see that as you do the grocery store rounds and being out there. You know, I think people are just simply tired and fed up. We're almost there. We still have a little ways to go, but that's adding to the stress.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think we need some help here.
Indeed we do. Corey and I were talking, and there was a wonderful presentation done recently, and we figured, you know what? I think all of us need a little bit more resilience. And so we have resilience expert Dr. Deborah Gilboa. She's also known as Dr. G, and she works with families, educators, executives, and businesses to identify the mindset and strategies to turn stress to your advantage. She's a leading media personality seen regularly on Today, Good Morning America, and she's the resilient expert for The Doctors. It's a great show, by the way. She's also featured frequently in the Washington Post, the New York Times, Huffington Post, and countless other digital and print outlets. Dr. G's a board-certified attending family physician. She's fluent in American Sign Language, and she lives in Pittsburgh with her 4 boys, home of Sidney Crosby. Got to get that in. Dr. Gilboa, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Thank you very much. You made it sound a little like Sidney lives with us, but sadly he does not.
That'd be a whole other interview.
It would. I agree.
Well, thank you for taking some time on a Sunday here with us. We know you are extremely busy, but it's such an important topic. And let's step back a little bit, and can you help us, first of all, define what resilience is?
Thank you very much. I love that question because it's kind of a bucket term, right? We all carry that bucket around. We think we understand it, but when we look, we have different things inside that bucket. So when I ask kids, I sometimes work with students and I'll say, what's resilience? And they'll often say the ability to bounce back after something stretches you. And I say that is 100% true if you're a rubber band. If you're a person, resilience comes with change. Any change requires resilience, and so change alters us. Any experience we go through, we can't bounce back to exactly how we were. So I define resilience as the ability to navigate change and come through it as much as you were before or more of the kind of person you want to be.
I love that definition. That is so much more makes sense, I guess. It resonates with me. Now, here we are talking about change in incredibly uncertain times. So I'm going to ask you this catch-all question. What are some of the necessary tools we need to cope now?
I think that we can think about it in terms of preparation, like what's the mindset that we could use to cope a little bit more easily? What are some in-the-weeds things we can do? And then how do we recover? Because as you both pointed out, boy, there's a lot of stress out there, right? So one of the mindset things that I really want to help people with is the idea that we really, tell me please if you disagree, but we've heard a lot, I think, in the last 20 years as doctors and as people that stress is something to be avoided, that it's poisonous, and we should try to avoid it at all costs. Do you feel like you've gotten that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the mindset shift I want to offer, because that is, I think 2020 went out of its way to prove that is an impossible goal, to avoid stress. Mm-hmm. The mindset shift is stress can be useful. It can be overwhelming, and there are times where we really need help or we have to minimize it where we can because there are places we can't. But stress itself builds our mental fitness very much the same way that exercise can build our physical fitness.
You know, it's such an interesting way of putting that. And people want to avoid stress. And I guess if you accept it as being somewhat normal, and now you're training your mind a little bit. And, let's go from tools, you mentioned a couple tools, to actual skills. We need your help here, Dr. G.
Yeah.
Okay, now that we're accepting it. This is part of our life. What are some of the skills that we need to step it up and become resilient problem solvers?
Well, one of the skills is that in the weeds, how do I deal with it when I'm facing things that I mentioned? And that is all the skills that you already have and that you could develop for managing your own discomfort. Because that's the hardest thing about change, right? I said every change is a stressor. Every change requires us to be resilient. So if you can think about your own expertise in yourself, what do you already do that's either positive or neutral? And by that I mean like doesn't damage you or someone that you care about, that helps you manage it when you don't like how you feel.
That's Dr. Gilboa. She is teaching us about how to manage our stress and become more resilient. I could not agree with you more. I work from a strength-based practice as a private practitioner, especially dealing with grief and loss. And I think that stress absolutely has gotten a bad rap. And when people believe, you believe it, you become it. Exactly. So let me ask you about some of the research on this.
Sure.
There's a bit. What I read was that there's between 20 and 40% of people's ability to be resilient might be genetic, meaning I guess innate. So what impacts the other 60 to 80%?
So I love that statistic because we actually have this societal belief that resilience is like 100% just sort of how you were born, or maybe a tiny bit impacted by your early experiences. But we think of it as like this fixed commodity, a character trait, and then you get what you get, and that's where you're at. But that's not true. There is a real growth mindset. That other 60 to 80% comes about based on a bunch of things, and they're all things you can affect yourself, that you can grow, like the connections and the network that you have, your ability to set boundaries, your ability, as I mentioned, to manage discomfort, the practice that you get opening to the possibilities, opening to change. There are a whole bunch of skills. There are actually 8 skills and 8 attributes that impact people's resilience, and only one of those is fixed, your past successes and past struggles. But the other 15 can all be grown.
Wow.
That's interesting. Talking with Dr. G here on Life Unrehearsed with Matt Delvecchio and Corey Sirota, and how we can do stress better. And just listening to you, Dr. G, I think you're right. Sometimes there's, pride and ego get in the way with stress and resilience. I could do this. My dad, my mom, they were strong. We be strong. And if you can accept the fact, like you're saying, this is what it is, let's tap into some of the skills that you're really good at. And so you've got some excellent strategies, and we want to get into some of these strategies. Can you start us off with a few simple ones we could implement right away?
Absolutely. One is looking at the network of connections that you've got and figuring out of the people that you really could call. We have this phrase, ride or die. The people that you really could call when you're having a hard time, they're not equal. And by that, I mean they're not equal in their bandwidth, whatever they're going through. And also, people are good at different things. So a friend might call me because I'm good at brainstorming ideas. A friend might call you, Matt, because you are really good at helping them suss out what they're experiencing and asking really good questions. Or they might call Corey because they're saying, hey, you know what? Corey's navigated a lot of discomfort and written about that. So knowing what the people in our network are really good at, what their expertise is in terms of their friendship with us, that can be really, really helpful.
It's quite interesting you say that, especially in this time of a pandemic, because we all tend, I think now, to keep things perhaps a little bit more inside. We're not as social. We're not out there. And being able to reach out to that network can be so beneficial. I think sometimes it may just be simply trying to pick up the phone. People may even be resisting that, hey, I'm going through some difficult times, and they want to hold that inside. So I love that about tapping into your network. And I could just automatically, there's going to be a sense of relief just simply by talking about it. Now, Dr. G, you, this is your expertise, and you claim that stress can produce the best results. It's such an interesting term and explanation when we do some little research on what you've done. And so we want to talk a little bit more about how stress can produce the results. But if you'd be kind enough, we got to do a quick traffic update here. And when we come back from traffic, we're going to ask Dr. G.
Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Leanna Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.
Welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corey Sirota, and along with my co-host Matt Del Vecchio, and we are talking with resilience expert Dr. Gilboa about how we can manage stress better. Dr. Gilboa, or Dr. G, as you're affectionately known, you claim that stress can produce the best results. Please explain what that means.
It sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds crazy that stress would be useful, but here's a really, I think, easy analogy, because we understand the value of exercise, right? So if I told you that walking up a flight of stairs to sit down and have that conversation with you, as a healthy person, I got winded walking up that flight of stairs, you might be too nice to say it, but you know what I need, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need some exercise. I mean, really, as a healthy person, if
yes,
one flight of stairs wins me, that's what I need. I need to walk up more stairs. And in the same way, if I want to be able to experience the stress life throws at me, but feel less winded by it, it's actually stress that will get me there. And I don't mean to diminish for a minute the negative effects that stress can have. But in the same way, if I got up tomorrow and I tried to run an Ironman triathlon, I could die. I mean, that's happened to people, and I'm not in great shape. I could be one of those people. But if I decided I wanted to run a marathon, a year from now, you'd say, oh, great, who's going to coach you, and what's your plan? What path are you following? And if I know for myself or for anyone in my family, like my kids, that I want them to be able to handle a year from now this amount of stress and be less bothered by it, or even, for example, for my grade 11 student, I would like him to be able to handle more stress because I know it's coming his way and be less winded by it, then stress with a coach and with the right, and I just mean coaching and support and a plan, stress is what'll get him there, actually.
So if I am understanding you correctly, the best way to learn how to manage stress is to slowly expose yourself to stressful situations as opposed to avoiding.
Exactly. And one of the things that we want to do, especially in this difficult time, is really protect ourselves and protect other people. And self-care has an important role here in terms of setting boundaries around what we say yes to and what we take time for. So all the things that you've heard, I'm not trying to poke holes and say that those things aren't true. I'm saying that you haven't failed yourself or your family or your work team when they're stressed. What matters is what support is rallied around them, what solutions and skills and strategies they use to manage it.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed with Matt and Corey, and that is Dr. G, Dr. Deborah Gilboa, about how we could manage stress better. And Dr. G, you have this magic to keep it nice and simple. Sometimes we'll have guests and we'll be finished with the interview, and it's like, what did they just say, and how am I going to implement those? And there may be some unrealistic expectations. You even take it a step further with your famous 5-minute strategy. And we love this because this is something that could be implemented right away, simple and quick. Can you tell us about the 5-minute strategy?
Yes, absolutely. So this has to do, again, with that idea of prep. How do I handle it in the weeds, and how do I recover after? If we agree that there's going to be stress. So the prep can be what we've talked about already, about deepening and widening your connections. It can be about figuring out, what do I already do? What do I already know about myself in terms of managing discomfort? And it can be about setting some boundaries, saying, I'm going to say yes to these things because they match my priorities, my need to make money or take care of other people or take care of myself. And I'm going to say no to some things that don't fit. But in the moment, so the first 2 minutes is acknowledging your expertise, what you already know about yourself. And the next 2 minutes is making a list of things in terms of managing your discomfort and reminding yourself to look for what choices you have. So my mom of blessed memory used to say, if you're still breathing, you've got options. You may not like any of them, but you have them. Pick one.
Right.
So in that moment, when you're in a situation where there's been a change, whether you wanted it or you didn't, you predicted it or you didn't, to figure out what choices do I still have. And, I think the pandemic restrictions are a great way to test this. If, as you've had in Quebec, you have restrictions that vary, right? And you find yourself in a situation where there's going to be more restrictions again, then you remind yourself, okay, this is very stressful. What choices do I still have? And you make a list and you pick one. Then just by making a list of what options you still have and choosing one or more, you're already acting in a resilient way. It doesn't mean that you can't feel the loss or the distrust or the discomfort of the new restrictions, but you are acting in a resilient way, giving yourself space for those feelings, but controlling what you can control, which is your own behavior.
I hear you. Sorry, go ahead.
The last minute of this 5 minutes is to say, okay, I picked something and I went with it. Now figure out, did it make me feel more like the kind of person I want to be or less? And if it made you feel less like the kind of person you want to be, you picked an argument with someone who was trying to enforce the restrictions, or you leaned too heavily on that 5 o'clock glass of wine, or whatever it was, then you say, okay, I need to find a different option in this situation. And if it made you feel like the kind of person you want to be, then you've done it. You've been resilient, including feeling the way you feel.
So important what you're saying. It resonates again so much with me and the work I'm doing. A lot of us, I think, listening can really relate to what you're saying in terms of not negating what's going on or the negative or the sad feelings, but making space for them, but also making space for what you can do about it. Lots of times my clients say to me, what choice do I have? And as you've just pointed out so clearly, I certainly encourage, I say, at the minute you say, what choice do I have? You're giving up your power and your ability to make some choices. You might not like them, as you said, but you do have them. And then, that suggestion of following up in terms of evaluating it and saying, I like what happened, I didn't. Okay, maybe I need to reevaluate. All just fantastic.
I have a question, Dr. G, and then we're talking to Dr. Gilboa about how we could manage stress better. As we wrap up here, I think many of us listening, including ourselves, we may know some people that are under the gun that are stressed, and they probably know that they're stressed, but they're keeping it to themselves. How can we reach out to someone who is really under the gun and having a difficult time? What would you suggest, and what should be said?
Matt, I really appreciate the question, because you mentioned earlier that people might hesitate to reach out. And one of the reasons we do is because we somehow want to measure our struggle against someone else's. And we tend to always think, I'm not having as hard a time as someone I've heard of, so I don't deserve help and compassion right now compared to them. When the people who love us, they're not measuring. So one of the ways we can reach out to someone that we fear is in that situation, they're struggling, but they don't feel like they should or could ask for help, is to reach out with empathy and some admiration, something that they've done that you admire and that you'd really like to know how you could support them. Not assuming that you know what they're experiencing, because nobody likes to be told what they're feeling, but just something that really opens the door. Admiration and empathy usually really open the door for that person to tell you what's going on with them.
Such wonderful words of advice, Corey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gilboa. You are fantastic. And I think that I would like to give a shout out to your website, askdoctorg.com. And how else can people reach you?
The easiest way is askdrg.com. And they can find me also on social media. I'm answering questions anytime you need them on Twitter or on Facebook.
All right. That's resilience expert Dr. Gilboa, known as Dr. G. AskDrG.com is where you could find her. And we want to thank you very much for taking some time on a Sunday here with us, Dr. G.
Thank you. Have a really great day.
You too. All right, Corey, what do we have coming up next week?
So he's wowed and amazed audiences literally all around the world. Next week on Life Unrehearsed, we are going to be diving into the minds of mentalist and hypnotist Spidey.
This guy is amazing. If you haven't seen him, you have to listen in next week for that. And have you ever wondered what it's like to be a musician with the Montreal Symphony Orchestra? I think you're going to be amazed about what work they put into it. And we're going to hear from principal timpanist Andrei Malashenko. He's the one playing the kettle drums at the back of the orchestra, and he'll be on with us next week. So thank you for listening to us, and many thanks to our technical producer, David Simon. You can catch us every Sunday at 4 p.m. on CJD 800.